of blood. This means war.
Once the news reaches Minos, of course, his grief is overwhelming and his rage and thirst for revenge is enormous.
King Minos decides to punish the Athenians in the worst possible way. He will feed them to the Minotaur. The Cretan navy drops anchor at Athens and delivers an ultimatum.
Minos demanded that they send 7 male virgins and 7 female virgins to be sacrificed to the Minotaur.
Virgins were a prized commodity in the ancient world because it was believed their purity made them closer to the gods.
They would be put on a ship, and the ship would take them in very degrading circumstances to Crete. They would be led, crying and in great tears, into the labyrinth where they would be consumed by the monster.
So goes the myth. But what is the connection to reality? Here, the story symbolizes an actual historical conflict. An epic struggle between an aging superpower and an up-and-coming state. Early in Greek history, Athens and Crete were real-life enemies. But Crete's massive navy gave it a decided advantage. In both myth and reality, it was David versus Goliath.
In the Minotaur myth is pretty clearly a symbolic overlay of real history. Crete was a very powerful civilization, and they kind of lorded it over the city-states on mainland Greece.
When Minos made this outrageous demand, what it was a reflection of the Cretan dominance of that entire area.
The Athenians told the Minotaur story as political propaganda. The Minotaur represented the tyranny of Crete. The labyrinth was Crete's nearly inescapable power, and the victims symbolized the suffering of Athens. The myth's purpose was to make the Cretans seem barbaric and evil, and it worked.
For the Greeks themselves, who embellished this story over the centuries, it was a very important proof that they and their gods and their rational thinking were superior to the Cretans and their bulls and their monsters.
In the myth, Athens is forced to send human sacrifices to the Minotaur every 9 years, or face all-out war with Crete. But why 9 years?
It seems from their records they had an understanding of the movement of the moon through various constellations that go through about a 9-year cycle. And that would be then the basis of the 9-year sacrifice.
Whenever a full moon falls on the equinox, it will be time to send fresh sacrifices to the beast. As the first victims are being locked inside the labyrinth, a pivotal event is unfolding across the sea. In a small kingdom 50 miles from Athens, a baby boy is being born. His name is Theseus. He is one of the first great heroes of Greek myth, the one who is destined to challenge the Minotaur.
The birth of Theseus is of preeminent importance in terms of Athenian national identity.
Theseus belongs to an older order of heroes. They are characterized by tremendous strength, tremendous bravery, and also great brain power.
Theseus is the son of a beautiful Greek princess, and not one, but 2 powerful fathers. On the night he was conceived, his mother had sex with both Aegeus, king of Athens, and Poseidon, god of the sea.
What usually happens is that the mother will sleep with the human father and also sleep in the same time frame with the divine father, so that the child is fertilized by two people simultaneously. Having dual paternity allows him to both inherit the throne from Aegeus, as well as have access to things like Poseidon's special favors.
This two-father scenario was a common plotline in ancient myths. It's even something real-life rulers often claimed for themselves.
One of the perhaps best known is Alexander the Great, who celebrates himself as being partially divine. Later on in the Roman period, the Roman emperors, starting with Augustus, claim that they became gods. It gives you a kind of authority if you can say, I'm actually the child of a god.
According to the myth, when Theseus is born, King Aegeus buries his sandals and a sword beneath a huge rock. He tells Theseus's mother that when the boy is strong enough to lift that rock, he should come to claim his rightful place as Prince of Athens. Nine years later, Crete again demands that 7 men and 7 women be sent as tribute to die in the Minotaur's labyrinth. The kingdom needs a hero. The third time Crete demands its tribute, Theseus is ready. He is finally strong enough to lift the rock that hides his father's sword and sandals. He vows to enter the labyrinth, battle the Minotaur, and free Athens from the tyranny of Crete. It's the classic face-off between monster and hero. And modern evidence has revealed some shocking truth behind it. The city of Athens is in mourning. Once again, it is time to send human sacrifices to the Minotaur. The innocent victims demanded by King Minos, the tyrant of Crete. Those chosen are sure to die. But there is one who vows to challenge fate. The Prince of Athens, Theseus. He is anxious to prove his bravery and to free his kingdom.
All heroes have to commit great acts in order to gain their status. So he needs to go out and do something great. And that is going to be to stop the Athenians from having to submit to Minos and submit their children to the Minotaur.
The stage is set. It's Theseus, heroic symbol of man at his best, against the Minotaur, the savage reflection of man at his worst. Before Theseus departs for Crete, his father gives him an important order. When and if he returns to Athens, he must hoist the white sail instead of the black. That way, when the ship appears on the horizon, the king will know his son is safe. According to the myth, this is where Theseus was headed. Knossos, the capital city of King Minos and the Cretans. The ancient Greeks believed this was the home of the Minotaur, a scene of horrific crimes against humanity. Today, its ruins still hold clues about the reality behind the myth. At the height of Crete's power, between 1700 and 1450 BC, this city was home to 100,000 people. At its center was a vast palace with a complex layout. In fact, some experts believe it was the original inspiration for the labyrinth.
It must have been extremely difficult for anyone to find their way all around that huge palace, which had something like 1,000 rooms in it and 5 stories in some places. There were many passageways in it. There were no halls. The passageways went from one little room to another little room, so you could not find a direct line anywhere.
My guess is that when the Greeks first saw this, they couldn't make sense of it, so that's where the notion of the labyrinth came from. They would have imagined it as a dungeony, dark series of corridors that violated the Greek sense of symmetry. Greeks like symmetry.
Modern excavations inside the palace have only strengthened its connection to the Minotaur myth. Throughout the site, signs of bull worship can be found. One fresco found in the palace even depicts a young man battling a bull. It's a scene that seems torn almost directly from the myth.
The depiction from the Knossos Palace shows a naked young man somersaulting over the top of a bull with large horns that seems to be enraged and chasing him.
An ancient palace that looks like a maze, filled with artifacts related to bulls. It's easy to see how this place might have inspired the myth. But the connections do not end there. Archaeologists have unearthed evidence suggesting the existence of a real King Minos. A throne room, with its seat still perfectly intact. It's the oldest ever found in Europe, dating back 3,500 years. Also found was an inscription in an ancient language that may even mention the king by name.
In the archives of the Temple of Crete, there were stone tablets which have inscribed on them words which look to be like the name of King Minos. It's one word, Minute, a second word, Mui-nu-ro-ja, which could mean Minos the king. Roja is a title for royalty.
These clues suggest King Minos may have actually lived. But the most intriguing connection to the Minotaur myth appears on another tablet found at the site. It depicts an offering to a so-called mistress of the labyrinth. Here, in writing, is a direct reference to the maze of the Minotaur. It's an unmistakable connection between the city of Knossos and the myth. But who was this mistress of the labyrinth? Her identity is an intriguing mystery. Experts believe it was a woman of great importance at the palace, a high-ranking priestess, or even the daughter of the king. In the myth, King Minos' daughter is Ariadne, and she plays an important role in the rest of the story.
We don't know who the mistress of the labyrinth was, but it could have been Ariadne, inasmuch as she was entitled to be the priestess of the temple because she was the first daughter of King Minos.
From the moment Theseus arrives in Crete to be sacrificed, Princess Ariadne is drawn to him.
Ariadne notices Theseus' bearing, his courage, his unblinking gaze, and is immediately smitten with him.
She's just sort of overcome by the power of her love for Theseus, and she immediately decides that she's going to help him because she doesn't want him to die in the labyrinth as all the other figures do.
But Ariadne must act fast. She seeks out Daedalus, the designer of the labyrinth, and begs him to explain how to escape it. What he gives her is a clue. In Old English translations of this myth, the word clue means a ball of twine. This is what Daedalus gives to Ariadne, and it's how the modern word clue originated.
And Daedalus said, why don't you just use a ball of twine, tie one end to the door, and then unravel it as you go into the labyrinth. Once you're in the center, you can find your way back out by following the twine. We have continued to use balls of twine in underwater exploration. The divers will tie the end of the twine to an opening in a wreck or a cave, go inside, explore, and then follow the twine back out again.